Well, nobody breaks down the Hall of Fame better than Fangraphs' Jay Jaffe, and he joins us now to talk a little bit about Dustin Pedroia, who's on the ballot for the first time, and a couple of other former Red Sox that are on the ballot as well. And Jay, thank you so much for joining us. And what I love about your writing as it's related to all these Hall of Fame candidates is that you get to do the full career retrospective. What was your favorite part about putting together this Pedroia one for the first time?
Well, I live here in New York. I've lived in New York for 30 years. I've been a partial season ticket holder for the Yankees for almost as long. When Pedroia was in his prime, I was rooting against rooting against the Red Sox and kind of enjoying that aspect of the rivalry. And by the time he was, I think mid-career, I joined the BBWA, and my partisan leanings kind of took the back burner. But I always had a little bit of suspicion regarding Pedroia and the way that he was regarded in Boston versus the way he was regarded everywhere else. Taking a more objective look, I think I appreciate him more, understand more what he meant to Red Sox fans. And the things that I think underappreciated in his career. So this was a good way to appreciate that. And this was one of the might have been, I think, relative to the likelihood that I was going to vote for him versus just the sheer process of assembling this. This was one of my favorite profiles to write of the whole series. Even though I ended up not voting for him. I enjoy making the case for this guy, for all these players, explaining to a voter, like, well, if you're inclined this way, this is what you get with this candidate. Dustin Pedroia, for example, has a very peak-centric case. His career numbers obviously don't measure up to, say, Joe Morgan or somebody like that. The guys who have the peak and longevity going for them. But he does have a certain appeal to voters who are maybe mostly peak minded. I think his case vaguely resembles that of, say, Nomar Garciaparra, to put it on the scale of another recent Red Sox favorite. It's basically an all peak candidacy, and the Hall of Fame does have a few of those guys, and they're kind of the exceptions rather than the rule. But if you want to understand why, say, Sandy Koufax or Dizzy Dean is in the Hall of Fame, you're looking at those sort of all peak cases. And, if enough voters believe this guy has that kind of value to his peak, he's going to get in. So Pedroia, I think, is, setting that up. I can at least explain, like, yeah, this is a guy who, if you are so inclined, you may want to vote for him, or at least keep him around on the ballot to consider whether there's a consensus there.
Yeah, and you wrote something super interesting in your piece about Dustin Pedroia, and I want to just relay it for the listener or the viewers that didn't get a chance to read it. You said, I did some number crunching and found that of the eligible players reaching 40 wins above replacement during their 7 seasons, weeding out those active, not yet eligible, or not eligible at all, and adjusting downward to 32 wins above replacement for catchers whose values are constrained by limitations of playing time, over 3/4 are enshrined, which was pretty remarkable. And as you totaled out, Dustin Pedroia's best 7 seasons, his peak WAR was actually at 41. So he's actually over that threshold that you're talking about. How much do you think that part of the equation, which includes obviously winning an MVP, a couple of World Series as a player, do you think is going to play into him staying on the ballot at least for several seasons at the very least, or several years at the very least?
Yeah, I think they're, what I'm saying there is that, yeah, this was a guy who was on pace to be a Hall of Famer with a normal career progression. I think we'd be talking about him as a lock. Granted, we'd be doing it, 3 or 4 years from now, because his career would have had a more natural ending than it did. But that's essentially what that calculus is telling you. My JAWS system, it gives you the objective data, and you can compare that to the players at the position that are already in the Hall. But you're also going to bring other information to anybody who's doing this voting is going to bring other information to their process here. And I think, like, Pedroia winning MVP, Rookie of the Year, 2 World Series, some Gold Gloves, some All-Star appearances, you're going to weigh all of that as well, and you'll be like, wow, this guy was regarded as a star in his day. The data that we have confirms that those judgments were largely correct. Maybe not every single year was he the most valuable fielder that he won in the year that he won a Gold Glove, but we know that defensive stats are kind of fuzzy. So yeah, there's I think that you can make the case that he's one of those guys that really would not be a horrible fit for the Hall of Fame, even with his truncated career. And some people see it that way. I mean, I just saw a former BBWA career excellence or career achievement award winner vote for Pedroia on his ballot. So, we've got his candidacy does have some appeal to the people who do a lot of thinking about this.
How much do you think that slide for Manny Machado in 2017, where he ultimately gets taken out, injures his leg, and effectively ends his career, how much does that hurt him overall, though, to get to that ultimate 75% threshold?
Well, as I did when I went through the litany of injuries that he dealt with, it sounds like the surgery that he'd had before that season, he was already arthritic. He already had bone on bone in there. So I don't think the Manny Machado slide precipitated this to the extent that I think some people would like to believe. I think he himself would tell you that too. He would also tell you that this is part of what comes with the territory of being a middle infielder. That slide could have happened any year of my career. You go back, you look at the Hal McRae's takeout slides in the 70s against Willie Randolph or whatever. I mean, you've got a Mack truck hitting a guy who wasn't much bigger than Pedroia in ways like, just cross body blocks thrown, like much closer to the base. I don't think, I think Machado's slide, I think we all agree, was probably a little too aggressive for what it was, but it was within the vast spectrum of baseball history. It was not anything that was an outlier. That was part of it, and he would tell you that. So I don't think, I think it certainly didn't help his cause, but Pedroia was already dealing with deteriorating condition in his knees, and he will tell you that.
There are a couple of other Red Sox on the ballot as well, and I want to hit on that. Some guys that only played a short amount of time. You had Ian Kinsler and Manny Ramirez, who obviously started as a prospect, got traded away, and then signed as a free agent, came back. It looks like, based on the tracking, Jay, both those guys are going to fall off the ballot. But there are two guys I want to hit on with you before we let you go. One of which is Billy Wagner, of course, the guy that didn't play a whole lot in Boston, only part of one season. But he's on the ballot for the final time. He just barely missed making the Hall of Fame this past year. You voted for him again. What was your rationale to have him on your ballot?
By my reliever JAWS system, which departs a little bit from wins above replacement by also incorporating win probability in a couple different flavors for relievers, I have him as the best reliever outside the Hall of Fame and number 6 all time. The 5 guys above him are all in. He is not quite their equal. He does not have the postseason volume or level of performance that a Mariano Rivera does, because nobody does. His postseason career probably looks much more like Trevor Hoffman, but he didn't have the volume of Trevor Hoffman's regular season career. But what the appeal of Wagner is, at the level of innings that he threw, which is 900, just above 900, he has the lowest opponent batting average against and the highest strikeout rate against. Pure dominance. He had an ERA 1 point something in his final year before walking away. The guy could have kept going. He chose to go home to his family. This tells me, that I think we're dinging. People are capable of dinging him a little too hard for the lack of volume. This guy was pure dominance, and to me, that case, pure dominance and already the best reliever outside the Hall. It was an easy choice for me, even knowing that like an Andy Pettitte threw 3 or 4 times as many innings, for example. I want to recognize the best players at each position. And if we're recognizing relievers, this is the guy I'm pointing to as next in line.
And that Red Sox tenure, again, it was very short, but it got him right back on that Hall of Fame trajectory, which was an interesting part of, I think, the whole career arc for Billy Wagner. Final guy I want to hit on with you, Manny Ramirez. He's on his 9th year on the ballot, so he's starting to get right toward the end there, Jay. And it looks like he's going to fall short. And all you can think about is, as great a player as he was, this was obviously self-inflicted.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I loved watching Manny Ramirez hit. One of the best natural born hitters I've ever seen, and I know there was a lot of hard work that went into it. Really enjoyed writing his profile. It dates back to when I was at Sports Illustrated. Now, um, the tales of his workload and training regimen in high school at Washington Heights are legendary. And he was quite a character. It's kind of fun to document some of his stuff. He also had some ugly stuff in there, including the two failed tests. Now, when I'm voting for the Hall of Fame, both in the virtual ballots that preceded me getting the vote 5 years ago, and my actual ballots, I distinguish between players whose connections to PED date to the time before there was a testing and penalty program in place versus the implementation of testing in 2004. Manny Ramirez and David Ortiz both being on the supposedly anonymous survey test list, for example, that doesn't move the needle with me. I've voted for players including Ortiz, who were on that survey test list, but and I voted for players who were connected in other ways before testing was implemented, like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. I have not voted for anybody who failed the test and was suspended. That includes Manny Ramirez not once but twice. It also includes Alex Rodriguez. That's my dividing line there as to whether I'm going to recognize a player's career or not. I think Manny Ramirez knew full and well what the consequences were for violating the joint drug agreement. He chose to go ahead with what he was doing anyway. He may have been using beforehand. He would have had amnesty for me if that was all it was. But once we got into that late career stuff where we could all have an agreed upon set of facts as to who failed the test and got suspended, he fell into that camp, and I've held off from voting for him, and it doesn't look like he's going to make it via this route. So he'll have to try his luck via the ERA committee sometime in the future.
Before we let you go, Jay, there's one thing about the Hall of Fame and the ballots that end up getting revealed by all the writers is that when somebody reveals a ballot, there's so much reaction out there to it. And again, you go into all this stuff so in depth, but what is that like for you when you ultimately reveal your ballot and then get all the reactions from everybody?
I've done the homework, and I don't have to, it's social media. Somebody wants to take issue with why I voted for this guy. I'm like, well, here's 3,000 words on the topic. I'm gonna make you read it, because I'm not going, I may boil it down depending upon the way the question is phrased. I may boil it down for somebody in 25 words or less, or 280 characters or less, but I want people to read what I've written. I fully explained the philosophy behind where I am at every turn, and because I know that it's helpful in other voters sorting out their own philosophies. They don't have to agree with me. They can understand where on the spectrum this guy is. Is Manny Ramirez a guy who violated the testing program? Yes. Is that different from this? Yes. I can make there are people who will vote for anybody regardless of their PED status. There are people who will vote for nobody, if they were even rumored to have used PEDs. So I want to help people. I want people find where they are philosophically and fit that into a consistent system, as much as I want to recognize the candidates that that I think are worthy. Because we're not all going to agree on all this. And I take it in stride when somebody disagrees with me. I just want them to, I want to understand what their philosophy is. I want to understand that their philosophy differs from mine, but here's my philosophy. I can defend it at length. I've written a whole book about it. I read a novella worth of it every year. So, here it is. You can't accuse me of not doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jay, again, I appreciate the time. And for those watching this, again, I don't think anybody breaks it down more objectively than you do. And you go into every career so in depth, giving the full story of it. And again, you did great work once again this year. Jay, thanks so much for the time. And look forward to seeing who ends up getting elected into the Hall of Fame on Tuesday.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you.